Hello everyone, I am Ivy Corvus, and today we're going to be talking about vampiric magic. And this is a subject that I have been wanting to talk about for a really long time. I've actually been practicing it a lot longer than 6 months, but I would say the last 6 months specifically, I decided to do a heavy focus with vampiric techniques. So I'm kind of excited to share my process with you today, some of the techniques that I find the most efficient. We're going to talk about what vampiric magic even is. We're going to talk about the talisman that I created, the inner dragon work that I've been doing, and a couple other things as well. If you are brand new to my channel, I am a witch, a chaos magician, a psychic, a shamanic practitioner. I do a lot of different things in the occult community, and part of the chaos magic paradigm is really bouncing around from different practices to see what works best for the practitioner and to really get experimental and to be your own scientist. So if you're interested in chaos magic, which is a totally separate thing that I have a whole playlist dedicated to on the homepage of my YouTube channel, go for it, go check it out. It's very different than vampiric magic, but part of chaos magic, what I'm trying to say, is this process of paradigm jumping. So I have currently paradigm jumped into vampiric magic over the past 6 months, and I'm ready to share it. The first thing that we need to discuss is the difference between vampire culture and vampiric magic. So let's get some of the misconceptions out of the way. Yes, some people do actually identify as vampires, just as some people do identify as witches, and just with the witchcraft community, the vampire community is just as diverse, and it is most likely not even close to what you would assume it would be based off TV shows and movies. So vampire culture, or vampirism in general, and people who actually identify as vampires, that is not necessarily what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I might do a vampire culture video later on, but this video is going to focus on vampiric magic specifically. So let's talk about the differences a little bit more, because not all vampires practice vampiric magic, and not all practitioners of vampiric magic are vampires. Another difference that I really want to point out is that vampirism, or vampire culture, is a lifestyle, and vampiric magic is a magical practice, one which any magical practitioner can adopt some of these techniques into their own practice. I think another big misconception that people have when they think vampire or vampirism, they think of the traditional energy vampire, and what most people think of when they hear that term is that one person that's just always sucking the life out of everyone, sucking the energy from the environment around them. Maybe they're doing it without even realizing that that's what they're doing, and it's really uncomfortable to be around those people. And I feel that that personally gives vampires, vampiric culture, and vampiric magic a really bad reputation. So vampiric people are not just running around sucking the life out of everyone, okay? First of all, as a vampiric practitioner myself, I don't want some random shitty energy, okay? I am very, very selective with where I receive my energy from. I don't want your shitty energy, Tiffany. Stop clutching your pearls. I'm sorry to all Tiffany's everywhere. That's just the first name that popped into my mind. And I personally practice consent. Consent is very, very important to me. I am not going to be drawing upon anyone or anything's energy that did not give me consent. And most of the vampiric practitioners that I have personally came across also value consent. Consent makes it a little bit sweeter. It's a much nicer exchange. So vampiric people, again, aren't just running around being jerks, okay? The traditional energy vampire that most people are thinking of really are giving a bad reputation to the vampire community, and it kind of makes me angry. But within the vampire community, like I said, it's so diverse. You have psychic vampires, you have sanguine vampires, you have some people that are kind of like a mix of both. Again, not going to really be diving too deep into that. I will potentially do a vampire culture video if there's enough interest. So if that's something that you're interested in, please put it in the comments below. But until then, I did actually do an interview with a vampiric witch. I think I did it almost 5 months ago when I was kind of beginning the journey with my vampiric magic practice, but I interviewed Jasmyne Ambrosia, and I'll link that video down below in the description box if you want to check that out. She is much more knowledgeable than I am on this subject, and I was really able to pick her brain and talk about an abundance of things in the vampire community. So if you're looking for a video that's more culture related, definitely check out that video. And I'm also going to have some book recommendations at the end of this video as well. One last disclaimer before we begin is that this is a sacred spiritual practice for a lot of people. And it's also a practice that gets a lot of hate especially from people that don't understand what it is that we're actually doing. So if anyone is rude or blatantly disrespectful in the comments, I will absolutely block and delete you. This is also not a topic for anybody under the age of 18 because we are going to be talking about more adult-related activities towards the end of this video. You can tell by the amount of disclaimers that I have on here that I was really hesitant to even make this video in the first place because people are ridiculous in the comments and they don't ever want to listen to what you have to say. They just want to comment their own biases without even watching the full video. So that is why I'm getting all these disclaimers out of the way first. Let's start out by talking about what vampiric magic even is in the first place, now that we've kind of differentiated it from vampire culture. So the entire goal of vampiric magic is to increase your life force. And this can be great for so many people. For people that struggle with energy issues, I personally struggle with chronic fatigue syndrome, so I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this can also be great for people who just genuinely have a difficult time taking up space. So if you are one of those people that's a little bit more shy, mild, and meek, and you really want to break out of your shell, gain confidence, take up more space, maybe you were told your entire life that you shouldn't be taking up space, so you make yourself smaller. That was me, okay? That was absolutely me. I think if people go back and watch the first handful of videos on my channel, hopefully you can see a difference in my confidence levels. And a lot of that, yes, has to do with me just getting more comfortable with YouTube over time, but also this vampiric magic really has increased my confidence. Vampiric magic involves an energy exchange among living creatures. And I say living creatures because I think most people who practice vampiric magic would go human to human, although you could probably do this with animals as well. But then it's like a little weird. If you're practicing consent, how do you get consent from an animal? But then all people that practice vampiric magic, not everyone cares about consent. So it's really up to you. I'm just gonna leave the definition open to some sort of energy exchange between living creatures where you are drawing upon another person or another creature's energy to increase your own life force. And you might be thinking, why would somebody ever consent to doing that in the first place? Why would anybody consent to giving away their energy to someone else? And we're gonna also talk about that a little bit more. So not only does it help you potentially with physical energy levels and confidence, for me personally, I've mentioned in a lot of my videos, I am a hardcore introvert. It's really, really difficult for me to be outside my home around people. It is totally, utterly draining to be around other human beings. And vampiric magic has really it's helped me reframe that in my mind, that when I do go out in public, when I am in crowds or hanging out with friends, there's a certain way that I draw upon the energy of the room. Again, we'll also talk about this, where I'm not really taking energy from any one particular person, but I'm taking energy from the room, the energy that's being raised by the collective bodies of creatures in that space. And so it increases my ability to be in crowds in that moment. It increases my energy levels so that way I can stay longer, I can be present longer. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't fix the whole thing. I'm still an introvert. I will always choose to be alone rather than in a crowd. It is never going to be a comfortable experience for me to be around humans, but vampiric magic does make it a little bit more bearable and a little bit easier for me. That way I'm not getting so drained and have like that introvert hangover after being around humans, because it doesn't even matter if I'm around people that I love and I'm having a great time. It is absolutely, utterly depleting. So this has really been helping with that. The inner dragon work has really helped me realign with my own self and my own purpose. So I'll explain that a little bit more when we get to inner dragon work, but there are so many benefits to vampiric magic. I really feel that it makes the practitioner feel more powerful. And some people maybe don't need to feel more powerful, but there are a select few that really could benefit from feeling more powerful and feeling strong. So how do you do vampiric magic? There's a couple different techniques that I have found personally effective that I would like to share with you. The first one that we need to establish though is the first one I started working with, and it's the Tendril technique. This is something that I have talked about extensively. I think I've talked about it in like 5 other videos on my channel because it's such a great technique, not only for vampiric magic, but also just energy sensing in general. I was already using the Tendril technique in my witchcraft practice, so this was something that was a really easy, smooth transition for me because I didn't necessarily have to learn anything that was super new to me. So if you're not already familiar with the Tendril technique, I'll kind of go over that that just very briefly and then talk about how I used it in a vampiric sense. So you want to have a general idea of how to center and ground your energy first. I feel like that's really, really important. But you would take your hands like so, and this is just, you can do it however you want to, but this is a great beginner place, I would say. Take your hands like so, and you're going to visualize these tendrils sprouting off of your fingertips and moving deeper and deeper into the environment away from your hands. And you can visualize these tendrils being any color, any shape. They can be sprouting leaves as they go or roots as they go. Whatever they look like for you, you're going to visualize these roots or these tendrils leaving your hand and going into the environment. And you definitely want to practice this quite a bit to get your tendrils to stretch further and further each time. In the beginning, you may only be able to get your tendrils to stretch an inch past your fingers, and then as time goes on, you can work on developing them further and further until they're able to fill up an entire room. But with energy sensing, what you would typically want to do is allow the energy of the room or an object or whatever to be able to latch onto your tendrils, and then you visualize drawing those tendrils back up into your hand, and then you assess. You sit there and you figure out, how do I feel in this moment? Is it giving me any images? Is it giving me any bodily sensations, as in, am I hot? Am I cold? Am I anxious? Whatever it is, you are sensing that energy that is now inside your body that you pulled from the environment. So that's just a witchcraft or energy work thing in general. But in a vampiric sense, you can use this tendril technique to draw upon someone else's energy. So for example, if you're doing this with one particular person, like my partner, for example, is probably one of the healthiest people I've ever met in my life, physically and mentally. I, however, have had a lot of struggles over the course of my life, and one of the things that I'm struggling with currently is anxiety. I get anxiety and panic attacks, and it's something that's not really pleasant, although I have found a lot of tips and tricks to actually work now, so it's been a really long time since I actually had a panic attack. But if I'm feeling extremely anxious, my partner will give consent and give their energy to me willingly to help kind of sedate my nervous system, because they are a very cool, calm, and collected person. I am not. So when I'm sitting down with them, if I'm feeling a little bit anxious, I will ask if I can take some of their energy, and you can either put your hand on them, or you don't even have to be touching the person, you can just be next to them. I'll typically put my hand on them, and then I will do this visualization technique with the tendrils to draw some of their energy into me. And from their perspective, it actually feels kind of good to give energy. I'm sure this would be different if it were a non-consensual thing, but consensually, to them, what they have articulated to me is that it feels almost like being sedated, but not in a bad sense, more just like a really calming sense. It feels like a very calming experience, and it's such a bond that's created between the person taking the energy and the person giving energy. And I will do the same thing for my partner in return. Oftentimes I will give my energy if they need it for whatever. So it's definitely a give and take relationship, and you can establish a really deep bond with someone this way. Another way that you can use the tendril technique is you can use it in crowded spaces, as I alluded to previously. And this isn't really directed towards one particular person, so it's not really like you're extracting a specific person's energy. When people get together in general, they typically raise energy of some sort, whether you're at a concert, a riot, maybe you're at a coffee shop where everyone's drinking caffeine and the conversation is buzzing. You can feel the energy in the air, and it's raised by all the people in the environment. So again, it's not the energy from a specific person that you're taking the energy that's raised in the environment, because there's so much extra energy in places like this where even if you were to skim some of that energy off the top, there would be more than enough to go around. And you might also want to consider what types of energies are in these locations. Like a certain type of concert is going to have very different energy than a protest or a riot. So you do kind of want to be mindful of where you're at, what type of energy is being raised. You could even have people over for dinner and have a dinner party in your own house and use this technique to draw upon the energy that's raised from all of the wonderful conversations sitting around the dinner table. So it doesn't have to be you going out to a nightclub, it doesn't have to be you going to a concert, it can simply be you hanging out with your friends or your family. And so when you use the tendril technique to extract that energy, what I typically do is I visualize my tendrils going into the environment and then almost going up towards the ceiling where I feel like all that energy has been raised, and I draw upon that energy up into the ceiling and bring it down into my body. And that energy being raised by the group continues to fuel my personal energy so that I can withstand social interactions for a lot longer. A lot of vampires love doing this at nightclubs especially. I feel like nightclubs is where it's at because that energy is just so sensual and delicious. You can go out to a nightclub and really absorb all that energy around you. So that's absolutely a hot spot. What I personally found for myself is that in the moment, I am so overly stimulated that I get to a certain point where it doesn't matter how much energy I am drawing upon, I'm overstimulated and I just need to get out of that social environment. So what I did is I created a talisman. So I'd like to talk about my talisman next. This is the talisman that I created. I'll link my video down below on amulets and talismans and how to create them out of jewelry pieces, but I basically wear this anytime I'm going to a place where I know there's going to be an abundance of energy, and I use this to absorb the energy in the environment and store it for me. That way later on when I get home, whenever I'm feeling really low energy, especially as a person with chronic fatigue syndrome, I can do a little ritual with this talisman to extract that energy and really boost my energy levels back up, increasing my life force. So if you're in a situation where you want to take advantage of all that energy in the group or in the crowd, but you don't necessarily want it in your body right now, create a talisman for yourself that can house all of that energy and store it for later use. Days later, weeks later, months later, whenever you need that extra energy, you can use this talisman. So I'm not going to share my personal ritual because I find that it's incredibly personal to me, but again, I'll link that amulets talisman video down below so you can get a general sense of how to even create a talisman in the first place. And then what I use to extract the energy from this talisman is the tendril technique. I visualize the tendrils going into the talisman and me drawing that energy out of it. Right now it's currently empty, so I really need to go to a concert, an event, something, but I will absolutely be wearing this pretty much wherever I go. I did do a post on Instagram at one point showing the actual ritual that I did, which again, I'm not gonna like film the entire thing, but if you're interested, you can go to my Instagram and at least see a photo of the ritual that I do with this talisman. It usually involves me setting up a little altar space with my inner dragon statue. I also have a snake that I like to put in the altar space, as well as shark's teeth, my own DNA, and then the talisman, and some sort of like black candle in the center. But really all the correspondences are about things that make me feel like a predator, things that make me feel immensely powerful. And so that's why I added the shark's teeth, the snake, the inner dragon, and the black candle, of course, to absorb everything, absorb all the energy. And by the way, I feel like there's going to be some pearl clutching about the way that I just used the word predator. Let me just say that predators and preys, that is a natural part of nature. It is cyclical. The word predator doesn't have to have a negative connotation. I find that predator and prey really does have a huge impact on vampiric magic and vampire culture in general, and playing the role of the predator doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. I think that we have in our minds associated predator with a lot of really negative things in society, and rightfully so, but it doesn't necessarily have to always be a bad thing, especially for me if you're practicing consensually. So I just had to throw that in there. Let's talk about inner dragon work. So this is another form of vampiric magic that doesn't necessarily involve, it doesn't really involve increasing your life force in the sense that you are extracting it from another human or another creature, but it does increase your life force in the sense that it connects you to your highest self. And this is not something that all people do with vampiric magic or in the vampire community. The concept of an inner dragon is very specific to a couple subsections of vampirism. So please know that not all vampires are going to work with some sort of inner dragon. And there's a lot of different philosophical approaches to an inner dragon. And I actually talked about this in I did a video on dark moon magic, and I talked about a bunch of rituals, and I think inner dragon work was one of those rituals. So typically on the dark moon is where I do most of my inner dragon work, and the inner dragon really represents your most highest self. Again, there's a lot of different perceptions on this. People use it to connect to different things, but for me and the way that I learned how to work with it, it is to connect to a part of yourself. So the inner dragon is you. You just need to call it forth. And this process has made me feel so much more powerful and confident in myself connecting to this inner dragon. And this is very different than like DJ Conway's dragon magic, or there's so many different types of dragon magic that are working with dragon entities on the astral realm, and that is not what I'm talking about. That is like a completely different style of magic. I'm talking about inner dragon work specifically as it pertains to you. So I'm not going to talk about the exercise in great depths in this video because I already did in that dark moon video, but what I will say is that when you want to work with your inner dragon, what you would do is stand in front of a mirror and you would kind of let your eyes soften a little bit and glaze over, and you want to make sure it's dark so that you can just barely see your reflection. And you may have to try this a couple times before your inner dragon actually shows up. For me, on the first try, I saw nothing. I stared into the mirror and I was like, what is going on? I see nothing at all. And so you can chant something here, you can be silent if you want to. What I basically did was I said something along the lines of, I call forth my inner dragon, I wish to see the truth, or I wish to connect to my higher self. And I would just kind of go into an altered state of consciousness. And it was the second time that I did this on a dark moon that I was actually able to see a dragon entity come forth. Whatever you end up doing with your inner dragon from there is really up to you. It's a total personal thing, connecting to your higher self. I am not going to share my journey with my inner dragon beyond this point because everything that happened after that is so personal that I don't want to share it with the world. I don't think it needs to be shared with the world, but I do encourage you to try it for yourself and see what happens. The last thing that I want to talk about here is sex magic, and I can't really go into great detail because you all know why. YouTube won't let me, so I'm not going to go into any great detail here, but you can imagine that you can play around with the different positions of giving and receiving when it comes to taking life force, taking energy from someone, or giving energy to someone. I think that sex magic and vampiric magic really marry well together. So use your imagination there, okay? I don't have to explain it any further. You can just figure it out for yourself. Actually, now that I think about it, I probably won't talk about vampire culture on this channel just because it is so incredibly controversial, and vampiric magic is controversial enough. I don't need to be making this even worse for myself. So I personally will most likely not talk about it, especially because it does involve a lot of blood for some people. Not all vampires work with blood, of course, but if you are interested, again, check out that interview I did with Jasmyne Ambrosia. I'm also going to link another video down below that talks about vampirism and BDSM specifically. So if you're interested in more vampire culture meets BDSM, there is a content creator that I love that goes into BDSM and all sorts of crazy stuff. So I will link her video down below in the description box. She talks about the vampire kink a little bit more, but just know that that video is not geared towards vampiric magic specifically. So it has nothing to do with the Tendril technique, with using this in a magical sense. This is just like role play type stuff. So I'm gonna link that video for anybody interested in that. But let's talk about some more resources. I have some book recommendations here as well. So the first book that most people recommend, that I've seen at least, is the Vampire Codex by Michelle Belanger. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. But this is probably a staple for most people in the vampire community. It doesn't necessarily talk a ton about vampire magic, but you can get a really lovely introduction to what it means to be some sort of vampire. So this was probably the book that most people start reading when they go down this path. So I have to recommend this one, of course, because it's a staple. However, I personally really like this next book. So this was Vampire Sanguinomicon, the Lexicon of the Living Vampire, and this is by Father Sebastian. Father Sebastian leads probably the world's biggest group of vampires. Again, there's so many different subsections of vampirism, so many different styles of practicing, and he has one particular tradition, one particular style. And reading through this book for me was really helpful because even though I don't necessarily want to follow his style and don't necessarily need to follow that tradition, it gave me some insight to how others actually practice and the community of vampirism in general. And he does give some exercises in here as well. I think he does talk about the inner dragon in here. I could be wrong, but he does have exercises. It's a lovely introduction to vampire culture in general. So even though this is a staple that I absolutely have to recommend because most people would recommend this book, I personally liked this one just a little bit better because it gave me more information on the different ways that you can practice. I just feel like it was a lot more robust, even if I didn't necessarily agree with everything in this book. So I hope that all of those resources are helpful for you. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on this subject. This video is kind of a trial to see if I can talk about more controversial things on this channel. I would like to, but unfortunately people are rude and disrespectful. So this is a trial to see like how it goes in general. So let me know your thoughts down below. If they're nice, I don't want to hear the rude ones, okay? You know, the rude people have clicked off by now. The rude people are not even listening to my outro at this point. So thank you all for whoever made it this far. I hope you find this enlightening and I hope you feel powerful.